Imagine a world where a single mistake, a single moment of miscalculation, triggers the unthinkable: global nuclear war. What if the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 had not ended in tense negotiations, but instead escalated into full-scale conflict? Tonight we dive into this chilling scenario, where history takes a dark and catastrophic turn. Stay with us until the end to uncover the shocking consequences of a nuclear World War III. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the closest the world has ever come to nuclear annihilation. In October 1962, American U-2 spy planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. mainland. President John F. Kennedy and his administration faced an agonizing decision: launch a military strike, blockade Cuba, or negotiate with the Soviets. Meanwhile, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev was determined to defend Cuba and counterbalance U.S. missiles stationed in Turkey. Tensions reached their peak on October 27, 1962, when a U.S. U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba. That same day, a Soviet submarine, B-59, armed with a nuclear torpedo, was cornered by American naval forces. Its captain, believing war had already begun, prepared to launch the torpedo, which could have triggered an all-out nuclear conflict. But history tells us that one man, Vasily Arkhipov, overruled the decision, preventing catastrophe. But what if he hadn't? What if the order had been given and the torpedo had been fired? The explosion would have obliterated the U.S. fleet in the area, killing thousands and sending shockwaves through Washington. The U.S. would likely retaliate with immediate airstrikes on Soviet missile installations in Cuba. Within hours, both nations would be on the brink of launching their entire nuclear arsenals. In our alternate reality, Kennedy, under immense pressure, orders a full-scale invasion of Cuba. Soviet forces on the island respond with tactical nuclear weapons, supplied secretly by Moscow. Within moments, a nuclear firestorm engulfs the island, wiping out both American and Soviet troops. The world watches in horror as the first nuclear war in history begins. Khrushchev, facing a direct attack on Soviet forces, retaliates. Moscow launches nuclear missiles at U.S. military bases in Europe, targeting NATO installations in West Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom. Within minutes, London, Paris, and Rome become infernos, killing millions instantly. The U.S. responds with ICBMs aimed at Moscow, Leningrad, and other key Soviet cities. As mushroom clouds rise over major cities, global panic ensues. Governments collapse, martial laws declared, and civilization as we know it begins to unravel. Communication networks fail, economies crash, and survivors are left to fend for themselves in a nuclear winter that darkens the planet. One of the most terrifying aspects of this alternate timeline is the aftermath. Nuclear explosions would ignite massive firestorms, sending ash and debris into the atmosphere. Within weeks, global temperatures would plummet, crops would fail, and mass starvation would grip the planet. Scientists estimate that in such a scenario, billions would perish within a year. The world would be unrecognizable. The superpowers, once the architects of the modern world, would be reduced to ruins. The few remaining nations untouched by direct strikes, perhaps in South America, Africa, or parts of Asia, would struggle to survive in a world devoid of infrastructure, trade, and stability. Without functional governments, local warlords and surviving military leaders would take control. Cities would become battlegrounds. Resources like clean water and uncontaminated food would become more valuable than gold, and the rule of law would collapse. Humanity, once reaching for the stars, would be reduced to scavengers in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. But could anything have stopped this catastrophe? Some historians believe that even in the event of nuclear war, there were still chances for de-escalation. Perhaps after the initial wave of destruction, rational minds would have sought a ceasefire. However, given the level of devastation, communication channels would have been severed, and political leadership might not have survived the first strikes. In this grim reality, peace would have been nearly impossible to achieve, with fragmented factions continuing to fight for power and resources in the wreckage of civilization. Interestingly, many people don't know that a single Soviet officer, Stanislav Petrov, prevented a similar nuclear disaster in 1983 when he ignored a false alarm indicating a U.S. missile attack. His decision to wait rather than retaliate may have saved the world. But what if no one had been there to make that call in 1962? If the Soviets had misinterpreted events as a full-scale American first strike, automatic retaliation would have followed, sealing the fate of billions in a fiery exchange that left no winners, only ashes. In an even more chilling possibility, some military analysts believe that if nuclear war had started, secret doomsday weapons, such as the Soviet dead hand system, could have automatically launched the remainder of the USSR's missiles, ensuring the total destruction of human civilization. If such a system had been active in 1962, even a limited nuclear exchange might have escalated uncontrollably, with machine-driven logic guaranteeing mutual obliteration beyond human intervention. But history took a different path. The crisis ended with a secret agreement. The US pledged not to invade Cuba, and in return, the Soviet Union withdrew its missiles. Behind the scenes, the US also quietly removed its nuclear missiles from Turkey. The world breathed a sigh of relief. This compromise demonstrated that even at the peak of Cold War tensions, diplomacy was still possible, proving that rational minds can sometimes prevail over the instinct for destruction. So, what can we learn from this alternate timeline? The lesson is clear. We have come frighteningly close to annihilation before, and we may again in the future. Nuclear weapons remain a threat, and history has shown us how easily miscalculations can lead to disaster. The responsibility lies with both leaders and citizens to ensure that such weapons are never used again, and that diplomacy remains the first line of defense against global catastrophe. Now I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think would have happened if nuclear war had broken out in 1962? Would civilization have survived, or would we be living in a radioactive wasteland? Let's discuss in the comments below. Your perspectives add depth to our discussion and help us explore these critical what-if scenarios together. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into an alternate history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. We have many more fascinating what-if scenarios coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. Your support allows us to continue bringing these thought-provoking stories to life. Before we go, remember, history is not just about what happened, but also about what could have happened. The choices made in the past have shaped our world, and the choices we make today will shape our future. Learning from history ensures we don't repeat its darkest moments. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and always look beyond the surface of history. Keep exploring the past to understand the present and prepare for the future. See you in the next video. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep wondering what if.